little different this year. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Travis Roberts, Director of Marketing and Community Engagement, but also I'm on the Special Events Committee. So on behalf of the Special Events Committee, we want to welcome you tonight. Now, my job is just to go over some Zoom housekeeping things to talk about. We think we've got all our technical kinks worked out, but we've kept everybody on mute for now. So if you don't mind, help us out there. That's going to keep some of the volume down. Also, we are recording this, so if you want to watch it later, come back. We'll be having it on our social channels. And if you're wanting to invite folks right now to join us and they don't have Zoom, they can go over to sw.edu. It's so easy to find right on the front page. They can click right through and watch the video without having to be part of Zoom. So there you go. Now, tonight, Dr. Brian Wright, he is going to be our EMC. So, Dr. Wright, I'm going to turn things over to you, and we're going to get things going tonight.
Thank you, Travis. And I just want to say good evening to everyone. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event. Southwest's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration has a long history, and we have had many incarnations held in many different locations across campus. But as Travis pointed out, this is our first time hosting this special day in an online format. Zoom has made the world a smaller place, but it has grown our network of friends and colleagues. And for that, we are very, very grateful. Every rainy cloud really does have a silver lining. So I'm very happy to welcome our friends, old and new, to tonight's celebration. Tonight's events hold even greater significance to us at Southwest as we're on the verge of launching our new diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. In this plan, we have defined diversity, equity, and inclusion as we see it, and we have created a virtual space on which we can share this information with the world. We've also set 5 major goals for ourselves. Goal 1 is to expand the representation and participation of underrepresented populations in the student body. Goal 2 is the engagement and retention of this diverse student body, while goal 3 is faculty and staff awareness toward competence. Goal 4 is to foster continuing growth as to the presence of diverse faculty and staff. And goal 5 is to review all of our college policies to make sure there aren't any hidden barriers in there. And of course, this will evolve as we grow. This plan and the fact we are preparing to hire a brand new position at Southwest, a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, makes me want to lift my voice and sing. I won't do that though, I promise. Those of you who know me know that I love to sing. I just don't know anyone who wants to listen. So instead of me singing, I'd like to use this as an opportunity to introduce a performance by the Wardlow Brothers. The brothers were born in Lyons, Georgia, and have come to be called gospel music's answer to Boys to Men. Here they are with Lift Every Voice and Sing.
I do believe we're having some technical difficulties there. I'm not sure. Yeah, John's shaking his head. Yes. Sorry about that, folks. So Dr. Wright, if Dr. Brian Wright, I guess we'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Tommy Wright.
Sure enough. Take the time and look this up. Go to YouTube and find the Wardlow Brothers and take a look at that song. But now I get to do something that I really enjoy, and that's introducing Dr. Wright. So Dr. Tommy Wright was hired, I believe, in November 2017, and he presented with Boots on the Ground in January 2018. His wife, Tracy, and daughter, Janae, remained in Tennessee as Janae was finishing her senior year in high school and Tracy was still busy with professional obligations. So Dr. Wright had to take up his post without his family by his side. He didn't allow his separation to hinder him in any way, as he quickly embraced Southwest's mission to transform lives, strengthen communities, and inspire excellence. He promised to carry this vision into the future, and so far, he has not disappointed. This being said, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the third president of Southwest Virginia Community College, Dr. Tommy Wright.
Hey, y'all. Well, I always enjoy being introduced by my brother, Brian Wright. That's our standing joke. But thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for spending time with us. But more importantly, thank you for thinking it appropriate that we spend time celebrating Dr. King tonight. We know that you could have been many other places, but we do know that you recognize the importance of Dr. King and what he has meant. And we know that tonight you'll be blessed for being here with us. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing to you our speaker for the evening, Pastor Reggie Hunt. It's hard to think of him as anything but just a friend. And I wish that I had a really warm, inviting welcome that I could restate for you, but we placed in the material all of his accomplishments and his background. But I will tell you that as far as I know, I'm still a much better golfer than him. I'm obviously better looking than him. But despite those things, we wanted to have Reggie speak to us tonight. He is a friend, a colleague, and most of all, he's a man of God, and he will bring some things for us tonight to think about. And I'm excited to hear what he has to say. So, without further ado, let's hear from Reggie Hunt. Thank you.
Hey, everyone, thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you tonight. It's an honor to be on with you and to be with the doctors, Wright, Dr. Tommy Wright, Dr. Tracy Wright are dear friends. I honestly don't know. I don't remember losing to Dr. Tommy Wright in golf, but if that's what he needs to say in order to move forward, we'll allow that to happen. But Dr. Tommy Wright and Tracy Wright are real dear to us and have been for a long time. Their imprint at Appalachian State still remains, and we're always honored to spend some time with them. For a while, we were neighbors, and then they moved, but they left some good life notes that we still navigate through as well. So I was honored to share this space with you. There's a lot of people that you could have speak to you on a day like this. And so it means a lot that you would allow me to share some time, space, and experience with you. I work at Appalachian State as the director of leadership development, have been the chaplain of ASU football for 20 seasons, also pastor a multi-ethnic church here in Boone that as of recently, 16 years, 8 months, and 8 days later, have purchased our first building here in Boone, North Carolina, being the first person of color to own a religious building in Boone in 100 years. So we have been navigating through a lot of different pieces. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but a little bit of background. I'm also a third generation pastor. My dad is a pastor in Winston-Salem. My grandfather was a pastor in Winston-Salem, Morganton, North Carolina, and so forth. So I've grown up around a lot of history, a lot of real important history when it comes to racial reconciliation. And my role for a long time has been trying to find ways to connect people with reconciliation from a faith standpoint and a secular standpoint. And I've been doing that for a long time. So thank you for allowing me again some time to spend with you. I don't claim to be an expert by any means, but hoping that the experiences that I have learned and share with you will be something that will encourage you to be bridge builders and close the gap in a lot of different ways. Dr. King, on a day like this, you get a lot of quotes from Dr. King. If you turn on any social media, it's trending with all kinds of quotes. But one of the quotes that's been real dear to me is Dr. King said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. I love that quote, but in a lot of ways, I feel like that maybe we have lost the vision of that. With all the quotes that Dr. King has and with all the messages that he has, in some ways, I feel like we've lost this interconnectedness, this desire to even be connected. In some ways, we spend more time fighting to be right than to be reconciled. We spend more time fighting to be justified than to be reconciled. And whether you are a person of faith or not, we seem to have missed the commonality, the common thread of our humanity. I also like the way that Richard Halverson said it. He was the chaplain of the U.S. Senate for years, and Richard Halverson wrote a book called Man to Man. In that book has one of my favorite quotes. He said, "No matter how great the prescription, it is inaccurate for healing if there's a misdiagnosis of the symptoms." He said, we know more about social deviance, but our crime rates are higher. This was in the 70s. He says, we know more about marriage and family, our divorce rates are higher. He said, no matter how much we have for the prescriptions, it's inaccurate if we misdiagnose the symptoms. In a lot of ways, maybe we misdiagnosed the symptoms. Maybe we have missed what it means for us and the responsibility that we can share together to bring reconciliation in our lifetime, not just off in a distant future. The third thing I would say to you, just kind of laying some foundation. My grandfather was a pastor in Asheville and then in Morganton. My grandfather worked for Congressman Steve Neal in North Carolina, who was the counterpart to Jesse Helms at the time, who was a known antagonist and racist. And when my grandfather was in Morganton, having put himself through school while my father was in middle school, my grandfather was putting up the first Black recreation center in Morganton, and the Klan threatened to come to his house. A rare thing happened at that moment. The sheriff deputized the deacons and the men of the church, which was a rare thing, for not only for men of color to be authorized to carry weaponry, but they authorized. And my grandfather, as it was said, was really proud that he got a badge and was deputized in Morganton, North Carolina. And my great grandmother was alive at the time. She tells me the story a little bit later. My father was 10 years old. And the way that the story goes was there was communicated threats that the Klan was going to come to my grandfather's house in opposition. My grandfather at that time stood his ground, and the men in the church hid in trees. And when the Klan came that night, as my great grandmother tells the story, the Klan turned around once they saw the men in the trees. It's one of my favorite stories because I feel like in a lot of ways, since I was in the 4th grade, I've been looking for the men in the trees, been looking for partnerships, people who would stand together, people that would be a part of the reconciliatory work that humanity is called to. And if, again, you're a person of faith, that faith has called us to. Why the 4th grade? Because in the 4th grade, I remember being asked to leave a Sunday school class as the teacher was talking about race, vacation Bible school, Sunday school, something along that line. And I quoted to her Ephesians 2:14. Ephesians 2:14 gave this description describing Jesus, where it says he himself is our peace. He who had taken the dividing wall of hostility, his purpose was to make the two one, and he put the enmity upon himself. It was saying that there would come a moment in time to where the races would be reconciled. The ethnic groups would come together. I knew that in the 4th grade, we had moved into this predominantly white neighborhood, and I began to understand that there had to be some kind of way to survive, not only survive being the only Black family in the neighborhood, but there also had to be a way for us to connect, not just to exist together, but to be reconciled and to grow together. So along the way, I've learned a few things that I'll share with you. Number one, I've learned everyone can speak the language of pain when our first response is compassion. If you look over the last few years, especially over 2020, when different events happen that really shake the very core of American culture, these things, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and we have to make sure that we don't move episodically. We have to make sure that the only time that we respond to this disease of racism is not when episodes happen. But when these episodes happen, I find that I hear from a lot of different people a feeling of being stuck, or a feeling of not feeling like they can connect. And so in the spring, when the response was swelling in our country of George Floyd's death, a lot of people said, I just don't know how to relate. I just don't know how to relate. I just don't know how to relate. So step number one, I think, in fulfilling the dream of Dr. King, making sure that we are a part of the woven structure of one another, is that we recognize that everyone can speak the language of pain when our first response is compassion. Our first response should not be defense. Our first response should not be justification. Our first response should not be, well, why was he there? What's his background? What's his history? You know, our first response should be basic compassion. Many bridges are built, many things are reconciled when our first response is basic compassion. I think that's what humanity is called to do. A few years ago, I had just started in ministry, and I got a call from the sheriff's office, which I was kind of nervous about. Didn't feel like I had been in any trouble, but whenever you get a call from the sheriff's office, you're a little bit nervous. And I got a call from the sheriff's office, and they told me that there was a situation and the sheriff needed my help. They met me down just a little bit below the football stadium, and hopped in the sheriff's car. And when I pulled up on the scene, there was SWAT team there, sheriff there, local police office there. It's a scene like I'd never seen before, like something out of a movie. When I got out of the car, just, you know, in my own naive way, got out into the car, looking around, immediately, two shields enclosed on me like that, and they put my head down. It was a police standoff. A young man who had been in some trouble was about to be pulled by the police, and decided that instead he would keep driving. And he was sitting in the car for a total of 4 hours, 2 of which I was there, with a gun to his head. While he's sitting with a gun to his head, he's asking questions about faith. I'm 10 yards from him, you know, a short first down, 10 yards from this man. And after a long standoff, he gets out of the car, which I think he's about to drop his weapon. He puts his hands together. He fires at the police. He's shot 16 times. As I run to his body, seeing something horrific, which I'll never forget, it was devastating. And I had the responsibility of communicating to police officers, law enforcement, many who had never fired their weapon at all, and at the same time going to speak to this young man, Chris Griggs' mother, explaining to her what had happened. There's no way that you can do both of those without basic compassion. Basic compassion for this young man whose life had ended, and basic compassion for his family and his mother. In that same year, if I'm right with my stats, in that same year, there was a young lady who went to our church, came to go visit her family. Super Bowl weekend, she's not heard of for 3 or 4 days. And after 3 or 4 days becomes a week. After a week becomes a little bit longer. And her body was found in Charleston, South Carolina. And her boyfriend had murdered her, and had also hid her body in the woods, and then committed suicide. Have the responsibility then of speaking to news media on behalf of her family, and trying to explain to her family why bad things happen to good people. The only way that you do that is basic compassion. Basic compassion. Everybody can speak the language of pain. I've never had a son that was gunned down. I've never had a daughter that was murdered. Basic compassion. And somewhere along the line, when we have been in this conversation, this dialogue of racism, reconciliation, and other things that polarize our country and our world, we've lost basic compassion. We have chosen sides, and it's almost like they're mutually exclusive, when really what humanity and faith calls us to is basic compassion. Basic compassion should be our first response. So the idea that we can't connect is not necessarily valid. Basic compassion, theological sense of urgency is what I tell. I tell our church basic compassion, a theological sense of urgency, and the idea that God himself is not colorblind. Like I think that if you're a faith person, it's very difficult to read the Bible and to think that God is colorblind. That the scriptures would even tell us different, that God recognizes ethnicity, not necessarily race, because race is the social construct, but ethnicity is something that God recognizes as a beautiful thing, especially when people start to move together. And the challenge again is whether or not we want to be right or whether or not we want to be reconciled, whether or not we want to learn to build bridges or whether or not we want to continue to be polarized. And what I learned through my experiences and also reflecting on that of others is our first response should be basic compassion. I've also learned that action without awareness is inaccurate. It's easy for us to take action based off of what we hear on news media outlets. It's easy for us to take action based off of what we see on blogs or social media platforms. But some of the greatest awareness can come from our conversations with people around us. Now, in a place like Boone, people say to me, well, it's hard because Boone doesn't have a lot of people of color. I actually think that makes it more difficult. As a person of color in a place where there are not a lot of people of color, the isolation seems to be more real. We don't have as many outlets to have these conversations. But what I have learned is that great awareness comes from having conversations with people who are not like us. Remember this, the active listener wins. The active listener wins. When we can have active listening, when we start to learn from the experiences of others and actually believe them, then we can grow together. A few years ago, maybe about 10 years ago, a young lady comes to me on campus and tells me that she has been sexually assaulted and harassed by a professor at the time that I knew fairly well. I had to make a moment in that moment, if I'm going to be an active listener, to decide whether or not I'm going to be an active listener and next step to believe the person. You know, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and when I came and started working with Appalachian, started to listen to student athletes, many whose experiences were different from mine. I started to listen to people from the south side of Chicago. I started to listen to people from Miami and other parts of the United States whose experiences were different from mine. So therefore, though I've never been to Miami, though I've never been to the south side of Chicago, though I've never been to these places where these people had experienced horrific things, I gained an experience as an active listener. There's some things that I'm not going to learn from the media outlets. There's a lot of things that I can learn by just listening to people who are different from me and people who are have a different experience, actually believing them and learning that though we may not agree on everything, there are some things that we can find, again, when our first response is compassion, and two, when we're committed to being an active listener, and three, when we are committed to awareness before action. If you have action without awareness, it leads to inaccurate. So I want to encourage you on that the active listener wins, and that if we're going to make real changes in our world, we're going to start with incremental changes, and these incremental changes start when we start to listen to one another, when we start to share and create environments. People say to me very often, like, Boone just doesn't have a lot of diversity. The question I ask is, what are we doing to create an atmosphere that facilitates diversity? When I'm talking to student athletes, when I'm talking to recruits, one of the things that I tell them, just one of my secrets here, you might can use this, Dr. Tommy, if you want. One of the secrets that I tell them is you're going to visit a lot of places, and a lot of places do a lot of things well. What we do at Appalachian in the athletics department is we set an atmosphere for excellence. They look at me and say, what do you mean? I said, well, atmosphere is very important. We don't grow oranges in Boone, not because it's not warm. It's just not warm long enough. We've got some warm days, it's just not warm long enough to sustain the growth that we want. So I encourage organizations, communities, colleges, teams, people to create atmospheres where people's voices can be heard, atmospheres where there's active listening, atmosphere where it's a safe place. One mentor told me, I'll give you a safe place to say a dangerous thing. So yes, on a Martin Luther King Memorial Day, we have an atmosphere where we want to have a conversation about race and reconciliation, but how do we sustain this atmosphere throughout the year so that we can have more conversations that bring more awareness, that bring more solutions, that build opportunities for us to, again, reconcile and build bridges. If we miss this, then we miss a lot of other things. What disqualifies us from connection is our inability to listen, our inability to have compassion, and our inability to find solutions and ways to move forward. I want to talk to you just one more part, and I want to read you an excerpt from my grandfather's message. Even from a faith standpoint, I look at this and I have a lot of conversations with my brothers and sisters who seem to think that the idea of justice is political, when and they seem in the faith world to kind of X that out, and that's not always necessarily the case. The wisest man in the Bible at the time, Solomon, wrote 2 times in one book that unequal weights and unjust scales is an abomination to the Lord. Now, if you've been around church, you know church people love that word abomination, right? But he says unequal weights and unjust scales are an abomination to the Lord. Even as people of faith, not assuming that all of you are, but to the ones that are, as people of faith, we have to address this. We have to recognize that that injustice, unequal weights, unjust scales is not pleasing to the Lord. People would say to me, well, these issues are a sin. And so we're going to say, some of my conservative brothers, these issues are a sin. Okay, amen, they're a sin. The Bible describes sin, not necessarily the media outlets. Okay, so if this is a sin and we have a structure and laws to protect what we believe is a sin, whatever that is, then we should also have structures and laws to also counter these things. You can't really say that in a faith world that you believe that abortion is a sin and it has to have laws to protect it, and then not say that the racial construct in America is also a sin, biblically saying, and not have laws to protect it. Unequal weights and unjust scales are an abomination to the Lord. I think it was Micah 6 who said, he's shown you, O people, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That walking humbly with God requires that we do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with our God. And right now, what we see is more of justification, more of pointing fingers, more of, if they wouldn't have done this, we wouldn't have done this. When the reality of it is humanity and faith call us to make sure that that a pound is a pound, whether it's your pound or my pound. We're not going to weigh things differently from one group than we would another. These are some of the lessons that I have learned. And on this day, I want to read you and wrapping up before we kind of get to a moment of some question and answers. I was blessed to have my grandfather's messages from the 1940s all the way to 1983 when he passed. And so this is his message from a Sunday after the 16th Avenue Church was bombed in Birmingham, Alabama, killing several young girls. I want to read you some of these excerpts and then I'll wrap up from there. He says, last Sunday around this time of day, many hearts in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, were grief-stricken because of the sin and corruption had so filled the hearts of men until it stooped so low that they had bombed the house of God. Not only was this act rendered in defiance of the Negro, but it was also in defiance of God. When we fought the Japanese in the Second World War and the Japanese would bomb the churches and hospitals, we said that they were the lowest of savages. I wonder what is the classification for these men who bombed the church on that last Sunday. I wonder how they slept at night. I wonder how they feel when they face each other. How did they feel when they learned that they had killed 4 innocent children? Children who were too young to fully understand the meaning of desegregation, too young to see the evils of it, too young to understand the meaning of the word freedom. I feel sure that they had at one time stood somewhere in a crowd and listened to whites hurl insults at their mothers and fathers and sisters, yet they were too young to understand the meaning. But in spite of their youth, this morning they are standing before the courts of heaven, pleading their case and the cause of the Negro people of the world. But they did not die in vain, because those of us who yet remain will carry the flag of freedom, the uncompromising demands of liberty, until there's no bars of discrimination in our world. There's no middle ground. There's no separate but equal. Either we be free or we be slaves. We have been denied our manhood, robbed of our dignities. We have skills, but no place to use them. We bear in our souls the imprint of the image of God, but we are denied the fundamental human right, the right to have, the right to hold, and the right to belong. Our agonies under segregation are the agonies of suffocation. We are cut off from the sources of full life by being separated from that which belongs to us. To be our whole and healthy selves, we must be able to identify ourselves in a free and complete association with that of which we are part. We cannot classify ourselves as citizens when we are being deprived of the duty and privileges of citizenship. There is a story of a white minister and his family moving to the southern town. And when they enrolled in their son in school, he noticed it was customary in the public school where his son was attending for the young adults of early grades to kiss their teacher twice a day, noon and afternoon. The school had ordered to integrate, and the minister found that the Negro boy had been assigned to his son's classroom and wondered what the introduction of the new racial element would do to this custom. So one day he visited the school and he saw the Negro boy in class. And when the bell sounded at the end of the day, the teacher told the Negro boy to stand aside while the other children would join. And you can all march together, she said. But as the white children filed by giving their goodbye kisses, the Negro boy came back and tried to worm his way towards the teacher. Again, he was gently taken aside and told, "You wait until the others will join, and then you can march out together." The teacher returned to the line, receiving farewell hugs. But then as she turned to the last child, the Negro boy, a wistful and eager look was on his face. His tiny arms stretched up to give the teacher a hug and a kiss. This time the teacher allowed the hug and the kiss, and there was a broad smile on his face as he skipped out the room. Perhaps the boy did not have a deep desire to kiss or hug the teacher, but there was in him the impulsive hunger to do what all the other children were doing, and to one with the members of his class. In the reaching arms of that little boy, we have a symbol as to why the 4 in Alabama died. We have a symbol of yearning hearts of all the people who were segregated from that humanity to which they now belong. This is one of the basic wants of our world today. We want to be accepted into the human family. We want to come home to ourselves and to our brothers. And we will not be satisfied until we live as men among men in this world. The record shows that our people suffer in many ways, but we will not and shall not be satisfied until we can wipe away the evil from ourselves and be able to know that we have the same chance that every man has. For we have learned that the word equality means sameness. We do not seek two things that are labeled black and white. We seek today one label, and that label is humanity, because we too are made in the image of God. Therefore, we draw the conclusion that the essential man has an innate dignity which must be respected, not only because we are creatures made and ordained by God, but also because we are creatures whom God loves. I'm a man who God loves. Nothing God intends for me must be denied to me. Your soul and mine, the souls of every black man, woman, and child, contain the mysteries and the wonders, the heights and the depths that are found in the souls of any people. And that is the duty of mankind to bring out this treasury. One more part. Whatever riches God has deposited, we believe ourselves something more than manual dexterity and physical endurance. We believe that the cultural lag of our people in the days before us can be explained, and that explanation does not prohibit our entering into cultural achievements of this day or equal footing with other people. One of the great writers said, Do you think that when a candle of genius has been lighted by the fire from above, it can be hid under a bushel of racial exclusiveness? No. Rather, it is set on a candlestick to give light to all who grope in darkness. We must not be satisfied until we can enter into the inheritance of all ages on equal terms with the rest. And who can say that we will not contribute our quota of genius to enrich the blood of the world? Many have lived and died before us, but they did not live in vain. As James Weldon Johnson said, the pledge to myself, which I have endeavored, is to keep through the greater part of my life. I will not allow one prejudiced person or 1 million or 100 million to blight my life. I will not let prejudice of any of its attendant humiliations or injustices bear me down to spiritual defeat. My inner life is mine. I shall defend it and maintain its integrities against all powers of hell. What he's saying here is not merely job opportunities or housing privileges or political status or freedom to use all one's native talent in chosen professions, but even more, the right of the essential life, the right of the soul to be itself and to become under the grace of God what it can be. I thought when I read that message, finding it in the stack of sermons, that it still seems to be relevant and really connecting with where we are, the right of the essential self, the right of the essential self to be all that God has called it to be, and to not allow the challenges, the adversities, even the racism that we experience in our world to blight out the right of the essential self. I'll take this time for any questions and answers. I hope that I said something that inspires you and helps you to think on a different level. I know that whenever we gather together, we have people from different life stages and people from different, as I call it, faith stages. But whatever we can do to be people who are first responders with compassion, people who are active listeners, and people who fight for the essential right of every human before God. I think that we can have an opportunity to make what Dr. King's had as a dream to be a vision before us. Thank you.
Pastor Reggie, thank you so much. Your message really hits home with me because I believe justice is the fruit. And Dr. King and Tracy Wright has helped me so much in the last couple of weeks. Things have seemed crazy. And Dr. King himself said we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. And Tracy has really helped me keep that in mind during the last few weeks as we've had some conversations. But again, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Pastor Reggie? Just type them in the chat and we'll be glad to get them to him. Tracy, did you have anything you wanted to add? I don't think so. She's just smiling at me.
No, I was trying to type, but first I'll just have to say to Pastor Reggie, who, when I was at Appalachian, when I first arrived, he was one of my children. He was a student there, and a lot of the students there called me Mama Wright, as some of you know from last year. But I just have to tell you, Pastor Reggie, my heart is just bursting with pride for this wonderful message that you have brought. And it's always special for my colleagues on the screen. You all know who work so closely with students, what a joy it is to educate and be a part of your students' lives, and a small part, but then to watch them grow and bloom and blossom. And that's how I'm feeling tonight. I'm just so full of just pride of Pastor Reggie for this outstanding message she has brought that challenges us. And I was taking notes if people were looking at me and what is she doing? I wasn't texting folks, but I was trying to get my notes down. You know, he reminded us that we can all speak the language of pain when we have compassion as our first response. And that's an important reminder. I think, just like he said, so often people are saying, well, I didn't know this, and I didn't know that. And I just think so often if people would just stop, listen, do your work. We all have work that we have to do in order to learn more about the situation of oppression and discrimination and so many injustices that people every single day in our community are faced with, but we're blind to it because we choose not to see, to not have that compassion. So I thought that was just really an important and powerful message and reminder for us all, and just that need to have those conversations. And even right here in Southwest Virginia, and Pastor Hunt, I will tell you, it feels a lot of days even more less diverse than Boone was. So those opportunities and seeking out the opportunities are so critical in a community like this that we call home. And so I would just encourage everyone, follow the guidance of Pastor Hunt. He's given us a challenge to bridge those gaps, to see everyone as essential. Thank you. Proud of you, son.
Thank you. It's so great to see you guys, and great to be. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more. I don't know if I ever told you, but and I'm saying this to the whole group, but my wife and I are interracial marriage, and when I was talking to my in-laws at the time about to engage, about to be married, they were concerned with us being in Boone, and they said, "Well, do you have any other couples that you can learn from?" And we said, "Yeah, we got the rights." and they always ask about you guys. You guys are so instrumental in our lives along the way and along the journey. So thank you for being with us. I know Dr. Brian, you might have some other questions, but let me say this about listening. I've used opportunities traveling with sports to learn. So when we were playing in Memphis, I was going to get some ribs, and I walk around the corner and there's the Lorraine Hotel, you know, where Martin Luther King was assassinated. I used that as an opportunity to learn, but we were down in Montgomery, and again, looking for some ribs. It's always ribs in history, right? I'm looking for some ribs, and I just happened to pass the place where Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, bus stop, you know, now there's a statue. And it was amazing. It took me a second to connect Selma to Montgomery, but I went and sat in a coffee shop, and I sit, and for a while, if you've ever been to Montgomery, right where Rosa Parks picks up the bus and refused to give up her seat, maybe about 30 yards across the street is where the telegraph was sent to start the Civil War. And then maybe par 5 up the road, Dr. Tommy, is where the march from Selma to Montgomery ends. I mean, all of that history is right around in that square. And I sat in a coffee shop and listened to some guys telling me about the Civil War and the Confederacy. Then I went to the Alabama Voices Museum that goes from the Creek Indians all the way up to Bear Bryant, including civil rights. And then I walked down the street and went to Bryant Stevenson's place in the Equal Justice Initiative. And I told my family at the time, next to salvation, it was one of the most moving parts of my life. I had to listen to the guy telling me about the Confederacy and about the Civil War, even though I did not agree. I had to listen to become more aware. And then I had to listen to the guys telling me about the Montgomery bus boycotts, even though I did agree. And that active listening piece, I just really believe is very key, because naturally, our natural abilities to connect would disqualify us. You as a white professor would not be able to relate to me as a Black man from Winston-Salem. So naturally, we would be disqualified unless we can enter in as an active listener and as a compassionate listener. So just another illustration there of, and I think those are pieces that that I learned too working with Doctors Wrights here when Dr. Tracy Wright was in what was then multicultural student development. I learned how to navigate with people. I learned how to not balance my faith, but integrate my faith on a daily basis. Dr. Wright was working for the equity of a lot of people. At that time, they were just, Appalachian was just getting around the corner with what they then called the open door policy, allowing people to really share some of their struggles. And it just was amazing that was, man, probably early 2000s, and we were just giving people an opportunity to share their struggles. So that active listening piece, I just want to encourage folks more and more again, that we're not going to get our solutions from our media outlets, better yet from our social media platforms, but we can listen to somebody right near us. Any questions, I'll be sure to answer some more.
I have one from Diane Lester. Some of us have family members or friends who we disagree with often anymore, but love them wholeheartedly. Over the last year, I've learned to listen more to them so that I don't inadvertently alienate them from learning from me or along with me, she says. And I think that reflects what you're saying.
Yeah. You know, I don't know the full question, but let me say this. In faith and outside, we should be listeners. I told a friend of mine, hey, if you stone a sinner as a sinner, he dies a sinner. You know, so like if we alienate people because we disagree with what they're doing or who they are, we have no opportunity to build a bridge. I think that we spend more time, the proverb says, if you argue with a fool, you become like him. So, you know, how much time do we spend on social media arguing with people that we've never met for change that we're never going to really connect? Now, people that are in our families, hey, at some point, as long as it depends on you, make every effort to live in harmony with somebody. But there is a moment where we can't see eye to eye, and we have to agree respectfully to move in different directions. But we're a limited resource. Each of us is a limited resource. So I would encourage you that when you kind of hit that mark and we can no longer move forward, then use your energy and your resources and your wisdom as a limited resource for people that want to bring change. Enter discussions. If I remember right, I think the word discussion, root word percussion, is to beat around. I mean, when we have discussions, we're in it to win it. When we have dialogue, we recognize that I have a piece of it, you have a piece of it. None of us has the whole answer. So we enter respective dialogues to try to learn from one another, not discussions to try to beat up one another and win. If the goal is to win, who has that, right? If the goal is to reconcile and to move forward, then there's another opportunity there. And it is harder with family, right? Because you kind of stuck with them sometimes, right?
Thank you, sir. And I think Ribs in History, I think that sounds like a good book for you in your spare time.
I will take, I might have to get you to edit it.
I'll do it. Okay, now we have a question. So as a Christian, we are instructed to do all things with love. How can we actively listen from a place of love to someone who is speaking words of hate?
Hey, that's tough, right? Great question. And let me go ahead and acknowledge it's really difficult. One of the hardest scriptures for me in the Bible is from 1 Peter. It says, when men reviled at him, he reviled not back. Instead, he entrusted himself to the one who judges righteously. Look, there's a lot of other things I'd rather do. I'd rather fast for 40 days than deal with that scripture, right? Like, I mean, just because my mom thought I was going to be a lawyer because I don't mind an argument. I don't mind a debate, right? And it's so hard to do that. But I think Martin Luther King said that it's through faith that we move with this. And notice that when Jesus told the disciples to do this hard thing of forgiving 70 times 7, that's the only time in the Bible that they said increase our faith. I mean, Jesus is like, I'm going to cast out demons. They're like, good. Jesus is like, I'm going to feed 5,000. He's like, good. Jesus is like, I'm going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Okay, good. But when they said forgive people that are hateful, the disciples are like, you're going to have to help us here. You're going to have to help us with some faith. We're not, this is the moment right here that we're going to struggle. And so I think that is part of it. And one, Francis Frangipane, great writer, says that it's not that the church shouldn't speak up for injustice, but if we're going to speak up for injustice, we have to do it with the motivation of love. And I believe from a faith standpoint, it requires faith and almost some supernatural strength. Because there is a moment of humility, but I don't think the Bible calls us to be abused as we're humble. So somebody who is, there's a lot of hate under the name of Christ. And probably one of the hardest things to watch in the year 2020 was to see the Capitol storm with the Jesus Save banner. To see that was like, wow, we're at a whole nother level now. I think that what I would say in just a real brief response there is this going to require your faith. It's going to require your patience. It's going to require that you, there's a biblical response to racism, and it is not to shy away. The biblical response to racism is to start with compassion, to move forward with faith, right? And to know, Jesus at one point says, hey, if there's a level of rejection that you might just have to shake the dust off of your feet and move forward. That's not, and to remember too, that it's a work of faith and a work of grace that transforms the heart of people. As a person who I feel like I can look sometimes on social media, and if somebody would just listen to me, I can change them from their hate. And I recognize that's not my job. My job is to live out what Christ likeness is. 1 John says those who walk with him must walk like him. The real fruit that our doctrine and our faith is legitimate is that we walk as Jesus walked. And since Jesus did not hate people, and Jesus actually didn't condemn sinners, he condemned hypocrites. And hypocrites were people who refused to see their own sin, but punish the sins of others. So if we're going to walk as Jesus walked, we can't use nationalism, politics, and a lot of other things to endorse religion. One, for God so loved the world, not just the United States, that he gave his only begotten son. So therefore, I can go on and on and on, but I want to take you back to that piece too, that biblical response is compassion. And Martin Luther King's last speech, the one where he says, you know, I may not get there with you, my eyes have seen, the actual message was about the Good Samaritan. And he said, the real question is not, why didn't the Levi stop? The question is not, why didn't the priest stop? But the Good Samaritan says, it's not what will happen to me if I stop. It's what will happen to them if I don't. So for people of faith, we can get caught off in the weeds with conversations that we can't really change, when we really need to be focusing on the road of reconciliation and change. And we can't reconcile with everybody. Hope I answered that in a long way.
I think so. We used to have an old priest years ago who always said, remember your behavior. You may be the only Christ some people ever meet. And so, you know, I've always kept that in mind. So we've got a question about sports. This could be our last one. But with news and events happening in the world as they are today, what would your message to the football team be when they go to play a big game, but have all these distractions going on around them?
Yeah, you know, the football team did some things, had some great conversations, and I was really impressed because there were some really good conversations with law enforcement and local donors that happened with the football team that I was really impressed with. But in short, I always remind the football team, focus is not what you stare at. Focus is what you refuse to be distracted by. So if you're going to focus, you're going to have to turn off the distractions in order to face what's happening right now. But the platform of athletics is a platform that could be used for a lot of good and a lot of change. So if you're 0-10, people probably aren't listening to you as much if you're 12-2, right? You know, so we have to focus on the pieces at hand, and we also have to some of the same things I told you in this conversation. I tell the football team, active listener wins. I mean, we're better in the locker room sometimes than we are on the social media platform. So that locker room mentality that we're all on the same team. And I just remind them of that. The last thing I tell football team is Spartan warriors. You could, in Spartan society, if you ever seen that movie 300, you could, if you lose your helmet, no big deal. If you lose your sword, you might be in a little bit of trouble. If you lose your shield, it was punishable by death, because to lose your shield was for everybody on the line. It's for everybody around. So how do we assemble and advance being concerned about one another? We can't tokenize one another. We have to be concerned with one another. So those are some of the things that I tell them to kind of help them stay focused. You know, you can't benefit from a group of people and not be concerned with what impacts them. So that was my challenge to athletics. Like, you can't benefit from a football team that has 70+% African Americans and not be concerned with what impacts them. You can't just tell them, hey, don't worry about it, just go play ball. Like, you got to create some space to where their concerns can be heard and respected with compassion.
Thank you so much, Pastor Reggie. If you could see the chat, I don't know if you have it open or not, but everyone is just extremely thankful for your message, and they're all expressing their feelings of being blessed by your message. So we are extremely thankful for you, and we just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and I hope that it inspires you guys to create space and be a part of transformative work.
Thank you very much. So moving on with our, go ahead, Dr. Wright.
Reggie, we want you to stay around for a few minutes. We know you're finished, but we want you to stay and celebrate with us on some student accomplishments. So if you don't mind hanging loose for a little while longer.
Sure, I'll do it.
That's a good transition. So now, on our campus, there is a wonderful individual who has served students for nearly 4 decades, though he says he always just wanted to be a bus driver. So he said he wanted to be a bus driver to help people get to their destinations. But this gentleman has been quoted as saying, so what I tell my students at Southwest Virginia Community College is that I traded my CDL in so that I could help students get to their destination. He says, I like to see students when they first start, and I like to be there on the night of graduation when they finish. That's what gets me up out of bed and has me going to Southwest, he said. So this wonderful soul is our own Dr. Mike Henry, and he has been helping students through the bus terminal of life for nearly 40 years. In the process, he has parked his figurative bus in the hearts of all who have been lucky enough to know him. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you Southwest's own Director of Student Support Services and bus driver extraordinaire, Dr. Mike Henry.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. It kind of touched me a little bit. You remember that. Basically what my calling in life was as far as the bus driver. Wow. I also want to say to Pastor Reggie, thanks for that inspirational message this evening. You gave us plenty of food for thought. And I'll be sure to tell Coach Morgan that our paths has crossed. Coach Morgan, I've been with him for, I guess, ever since he's been to Bluefield and been the coach at Bluefield College. And great man, he's done a lot of great things for a lot of young men at Bluefield College. This evening, I've been afforded the opportunity to introduce and recognize 4 Southwest Virginia Community College students that have been selected for the Southwest Virginia Community College Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. honorarium for 2021. These students were selected on ambition, their GPA, credits completed toward graduation, along with the rigor of their program of study, as well as fulfilling some well-needed areas in our communities. And I'll ask John if he would pull up our first recipient so everyone can get a picture of whom we're talking about. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I wanted folks to see and recognize this student.
Yes, sir. They're coming right up.
All right. I will say to Pastor Reggie and also to Dr. and Mrs. Wright, my daughter ran track for King, and we used to come to Appalachian State, and it seemed like each time that they would have the track meet at Appalachian State's football team was always in a playoff game, and I kept hearing the name of the Mountaineers. And, I was looking for the guys from West Virginia. I said, where they at? Where they at? I didn't know there was any other Mountaineers around until I met the App State Mountaineers. So I learned some things later on in life. I thought about living in West Virginia mostly all of my life that we were the one and only Mountaineers. All right, here we go. Here's our first recipient, which is Miss Dolores Williams. She's completed 62 cumulative credits with a GPA of 3.95. She's an education major in early childhood development. And in times like these, we definitely have a need for more teachers. She's a graduate of Bluefield High School, and she resides in Bluefield, Virginia. So we say congratulations to Miss Dolores Williams. Our next recipient is Mr. Nicholas Livingston. Mr. Nicholas Livingston, he's completed 36 cumulative credits with a GPA of 3.875 in the Health Science Technology program, with plans to major in the Occupational Therapy Assistant program. He's also one of our athletes on the Flying Eagles basketball team. He's a graduate of Eastside High School and resides in Coburn, Virginia. Congratulations, Nicholas. Our next recipient is Mr. Eric Sherman. Mr. Eric Sherman has completed 65 cumulative credits with a 3.3 GPA, majoring in one of the Allied Health Technology programs, Occupational Therapy Assistant. He's a graduate of Big Creek High School, the former Big Creek High School, my old alma mater, in War, West Virginia. And he resides in Bishop, Virginia, just right across the mountain from us. Congratulations, Eric. And our final recipient is Miss Hattie Jones. Miss Hattie Jones, she's completed 130 cumulative credits with a 3.0 GPA, along with completion of an associate degree last summer, and is currently in the licensed practical nursing program. We don't have to go very far to see the need for nurses or other healthcare workers. Miss Hattie has found her niche in life and likes her field of study. She's a graduate of Tazewell High School and resides in North Tazewell, Virginia. Finally, let me say, again, we say congratulations to all of the Southwest Virginia Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. honorarium recipients for 2021. Our hope is that you will continue to do well in your programs of study and move on to be all that you can be. We also encourage, if time allows, to take a moment to encourage our younger students, because you have been tested and tried. Remember, to whom much is given, much is required. We just say thank you and keep up the good work and have a great evening. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Henry, and congratulations to the 4 that we've just recognized. I'm so proud of them, especially Miss Hattie. I got to say it to Miss Hattie. So, Pastor Reggie, Dr. Mike, thank you so much. We are at the end of our program, so I would like to turn it over to Dr. Tommy Wright.
Thanks, Brian. And could we all just sort of give Brian a hand clap of praise there, because he's done a great job sort of emceeing for us tonight. And
thank you.
And as you all know, Brian has a passion for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and he's outlined our goals for our DEI plan at the start of the program. And what he probably didn't say is that he championed that group. And so the work that he's put in to this cause and to where we are at this point has been tremendous. And so we do want to thank him. Dr. Henry, thank you for 40 years, and I hope you got another 40 in you. So, you know, when I came here, y'all asked me if I was going to beat, someone asked me if I was going to beat Dr. King's record. He stayed here 40 years, and I said, I just hope to be alive in 40 years. And so I hope you're going to stay with us a while longer. Reggie, as always, my friend, wonderful job. A lot that we needed to hear, a lot that we need to put to work. And as you said, one of the early things, we need to do this all year long, every year long, not just today, not just Black History Month. A lot of work to do. So we're trying to do that here at Southwest. We're going to keep pushing forward. But thank you for your friendship and for sharing with us tonight. And lastly, thank all of you all one more time for being with us tonight. I know it was out of the norm. We don't do a lot in the evenings at Southwest. We do mainly during the daytime events. So I know it was a little bit different for you. I hope that you find the time was well spent. So with that, I hope that you enjoyed this format. We are going to be doing some things this year for Black History Month. Around the middle of February, we are co-hosting an event with Emory and Henry, and we're having a national speaker, and we'll have a few other events during Black History Month too. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. We'll put out a schedule here in the coming days. With that, again, thanks to all of you. And most importantly, thank you, Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King, for all that you have done to have us be at a place to where we know and appreciate all that you have done, and that we will continue to forever remember all that you have ever done. So thank you, and to all, good night.